Today on Stay Broke Podcast, we're excited to welcome a guest whose journey is a masterclass in carving out success through craftsmanship, vision, and relentless pursuit of excellence. Michael Donato is the founder of Knife Purveyor, a premier destination for collectors and enthusiasts of high-end custom and investment-grade knives. With an eye for detail and a deep respect for artisan skill, Michael has turned his passion for fine blades into a thriving business that bridges tradition with modern commerce. What started as a niche interest has evolved into a global respected platform where makers and collectors connect. Michael's expertise, integrity, and reputation for curating only the finest custom pieces has earned him trust across the knife collecting community and beyond. But Knife Purveyor is more than just knives. It's a story of strategic growth, branding, and an understanding the value of a specialized market. Michael brings decades of expertise, not just in sourcing and selling, but in building relationships, staying true to a brand ethos, and running a business built to last. Whether you're into blades or business, today's conversation is packed with lessons on authenticity, niche branding, and the power of turning passion into profit. Michael, welcome to the Stay Broke Podcast.
Randy, thank you for having me here today. Thank you for coming, and thank you for taking a portion of my story and sharing it with the world. It is a work in progress. It's always been a work in progress.
Isn't everything?
100%. Ever since I was a little boy, I always enjoyed speaking with people. I always enjoyed structuring deals. I would literally leave my house on a Saturday morning, ride my bicycle down to the supermarket, and help people baggage their groceries and then carry it out to their car just to make money. After that, I got a newspaper route. While delivering the newspapers, I actually would always deliver the newspapers to the last restaurant on my route, and it was an Italian restaurant called La Fontana. At 4:00 in the afternoon, everyone would meet there, the bartenders, the waiters, the chefs, the kitchen staff, and they'd have a family meal. And I would make it a point to get there at the family meal. Any of my extra newspapers I'd hand out to all the guys, sit down and eat with them. And that was a part of the journey. I actually learned to be a dishwasher, a food prep, a busboy, a waiter. And it was all about human interaction. And that's what I would say. The beginning of life is human interaction. That was the beginning of my business.
I like that. And that's the whole point of what we're trying to do here. Like, there's so many businesses that exist that people don't think about. And there's a way to be the best in every niche market, and like finding people that are doing that, it's awesome. And then bringing that story to other people and showing that you can do something that everybody tells you it's not going to work, and you can make it work if you have that passion for it and you believe in yourself. So yeah, we appreciate you sitting down to tell us a little bit about your story today. Can you kind of take us back to the beginning of how Knife Purveyor came to life and what inspired you to turn, this passion into a full-time business, or how that transpired?
I'd be happy to. So I guess it all started with, I was in college for audiology and speech pathology. It was a very intensive course. And after doing my clinical setting, I realized it really was not for me. And I put a lot of time and effort into it. And I wish that I would have done some observation of the clinical setting or donated some time before choosing my major, because that's something I would definitely recommend for anybody before delving into something. Look into what the job is. If you can, donate some of your time, if you can do an internship before choosing a major, that would give you a very nice introduction. My mistake, I didn't do that.
Not a lot of people do. It's like, that's something that I'm trying to get my daughters to do. We totally encourage them to take a gap year, you know what I mean? And like experience life a little bit before you invest everything into one thing.
Oh yeah, and it's a huge investment. Most children or most students who come out of college are in such severe debt that, to me, when I graduated from SUNY Plattsburgh, I only had about $30,000 worth of debt. But that was a lot of money for me at the time. And it's still a lot of money for me now. So, but what had happened was, as I was getting ready to graduate from school, I ran into a friend of mine, and I hadn't seen him all year. I said, "Where have you been?" And he said, "I was actually studying abroad." And I said, "Well, I always wanted to study abroad, but being I was in such a stringent class load, if you missed one semester, it set you back a whole year." So I introduced myself to the International Studies Department, and it turned out they actually had a work abroad program. And I applied for the work abroad program. And at that time, there were only 3 countries that had not met their the capacity yet. They still had availability. It was Japan, Germany, and Ireland. And I'm like, well, I don't speak Japanese and I don't speak German. I said, I'd love to learn more about Ireland. So I applied for the work abroad program and I got accepted into it in Ireland, and I had a 4-month visa. So the entire summer from graduating from college to going to Ireland, I bartended every night of the summer at the Jersey Shore, and I opened a small little construction company where I was doing roofing, siding, deck work, just to make enough money that I could save whatever I could and go to Ireland with a nice bankroll, right? So I moved to Ireland and I accepted a job at a 5-star hotel called the Fitzwilliams Hotel, right in the heart of Grafton Street, right across from St. Stephen's Green. And it catered to the most wealthy people. I had no idea there was so much wealth on the planet. You know, growing up on Staten Island, there was only one area of wealth, and that was Toad Hill, where, you know, all the doctors and the lawyers lived. So on Staten Island, it was very much a white collar and blue collar community. Moving to Ireland, it opened my eyes. People were dining we had 2 Michelin star restaurants on the premises, and the average person was spending well over $100 just to eat there. That's not including wine. So working at the Fitzwilliams Hotel opened my eyes to wealth, and I had no idea there was so much wealth on the planet, right? Well, that was the first step in the process. The next step in the process is I backpacked through Europe and Africa. I moved from Ireland. I flew to Prague. I spent X amount of time in Prague. I went down to Budapest. I wound up going to Amsterdam. I was in France. I was all over, really. Right. But every place that I went to, I made it a point to really delve into their culture, figure out what they were known for, visit the finest museums on the planet. I literally visited the Louvre, the Prada, the Casa de Greco, the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, the Fine Art Museum in Nice, the Fine Art Museum in Budapest, the Picasso Museum in Barcelona. I fell in love with the arts, and I said, geez, I want to deal with wealthy people because they're going to spend money. They have it to spend, right? I want to deal with really cool things. I want to, while I was at the museums, I'm like, why is that museum work? Why is this in museum work? And I started to really become self-educated at that point, and I was exposing myself to so many different things that when I came back to New York, I was literally penniless. Matter of fact, as you remember, I was over $30,000 in debt from college. So I came back to New York, and I wanted to reestablish the fact that that wealth is also in New York, not just in Ireland. And of course it was. I started to research the finest restaurants. As I said earlier, I worked at La Fontana, and I knew that I could bartend. I knew that I could waiter. So I created a resume. I, of course, included that I was the assistant concierge at the Fitzwilliams Hotel, in Dublin on that. And I put in my resume at Jean-Georges Restaurant, La Côte Basque, Aureal, the top restaurants in New York City that, once again, catered to the most wealthy. And I wound up working at Jean-Georges Restaurant, which was located at the 59th Street Trump International Building. And I worked there for a period of time. And once again, it just reiterated the fact there's a lot of money out there, right? During this time, I started subscribing to the Robb Report, the DuPont Registry. I started donating money to the Guggenheim and the Metropolitan Museum of Art at the lowest level that I could, that would give me the associate's membership that allowed me invites to the black tie affairs, the art exhibitions. And I created a small business card. It was called Acquisitions Unlimited. And the motto of the company was procurement essentials for those who can. And when I was going to these different venues, I would meet doctors, lawyers, politicians, socialites. And of course, everyone asked, what do you do for a living? And I said, well, I'm a purchasing agent. And I would help people get different things, from artwork to cars to jewelry. And the long story short, a gentleman wanted a Ron Lake knife. And I said, who's Ron Lake? And he had told me, and I said, how much would you spend on a Ron Lake knife? And he said, $5,000. So I did a little research, and it just so turned out that the New York Custom Knife Show was coming to New York within a month. And who was going to be there? Ron Lake. So I made it a point to attend the show. I went right to Ron Lake's table. He had one knife on his table, and it was a gold-lipped pearl interframe tail lock. That's his most desirable model. It was the interframe and the tail lock. That's what he was known for, and he had one of them on his table. So I introduced myself, and I asked him, I said, is this available? He goes, yes. And I said, how much? He said, $3,500. I said, I'd like to buy it. And he smiled and he said, most of the people in this room would like to buy this knife, but this is the only one I have. And to be fair, he pulls out a deck of bicycle cards, right? He opens it up, fans it, and he says, take a card. So I took a card, he ripped it in half, and he put half of it in a bag, and he says, the drawing's at 3:00. Don't be late. Come back to my table, and whoever's card gets drawn is going to have the ability to buy the knife. So I'm walking around the, I think it was the Crown Plaza at the time, the Crown Plaza knife show, and I'm meeting these makers like Buster Warinsky, Joe Caius, Henry Frank, and I'm blown away. I'm like, holy cow, wait, you made this knife? He goes, yeah, I made that knife, and I'm handling it, I'm looking at the materials, I'm like, wow, I'm like, I didn't even know that this existed, right? So fast forward to like 2:45, I didn't want to be late. I got to Ron Lake's table, and there's literally 50 people waiting for him to, pull out the card. And the guy gets his card pulled, gives him 35 $100 bills, pays him immediately, and he's looking at the knife, and a gentleman taps him on the shoulder. The gentleman has salt and pepper, like flowing hair. He has a pink boa around his neck. He has these glasses that have gold crocodiles on the side. And I was like blown away. And he just said to the gentleman, he said, excuse me, that's a fine knife. May I see it? And he says, yeah, sure. And he shows him the knife. And the gentleman says to the gentleman who just got drawn, would you be willing to sell it? And he said, maybe, I just got it. What are you thinking? And the deal was $10,000 for that knife. So that gentleman who was lucky enough to draw it for $3,500 just sold it immediately for 10, and I had a buyer for 5, and I thought I was doing well. And that was the beginning of getting introduced to the custom knife route.
I like that. I think, backpacking through Europe, like I was in the military and I was stationed in Europe, and like that experience changed my life because, like you said, I didn't just hang around base. I wasn't just at the bar on base. I went out and I made friends. I experienced culture. I got to go to dances at the university. I got to go to private clubs with the fraternity sorority groups. Like I got to really, they took me to different countries on college trips, and like
Beautiful.
It just opened up my eyes to like so many things. It just made me see the world a different way. And I think it's something else that you said that like is already becoming a common theme here is like you put yourself in situations and take them as an opportunity that other people might be in the same situation and be resentful. Like a bartender, it's like you can go there at the nicest place and you're there for a paycheck, and you can be like these snobby people with money, whatever, and look so negatively on things and just get stuck. And instead, you chose to take the path of what's my opportunity? Yes. What can I do? And it's like people ask what I do for a living, and it's kind of hard to explain because I do a lot of different things. So I like what you said because I'm always like, I don't know. What do you need?
Right. Yes.
And it opens up doors. It's an opportunity. Like sometimes I'm joking, sometimes I'm not. But you created a business to say, what do you need?
Yes.
And let me see if I can get it for you. So that's cool. I really like that.
I would say that if anyone had the opportunity to create their own path in life, which everyone does, literally for the most part, right? If you're going to be selling burgers at a restaurant, why not go to the restaurant that charges $25 for the burger instead of $5? If you're the waiter or waitress, you're making 20% if you do your job well, right? So whenever I would choose places to put my time and effort, I would make sure to handpick it. I handpicked the Fitzwilliams Hotel because it was a brand new hotel. It was located right in the heart of Dublin. I'm like, if I'm going to do this, why not do it? Time you never, ever get back, right? And there's an old saying, you learn from your mistakes. Well, truly smart people learn from other people's mistakes. And the ultimate smart person learns from other people's successes. So if you can actually use your time and learn through others and work with others, that's such a key instrumental portion. If I can pass on to my children, if I can pass on to my friends, I love helping. I was coaching children in hockey. And the whole idea is to fast track that, help them understand why and understand how as quick as possible. So that way they can run with it and interpret their own way and make their own little twists and turns, but take away as many of those little chutes and ladders, for lack of a better term, the pitfalls, to try to fast track. And that's what life should be about, in my opinion.
We hope you're enjoying the interview so far. Thank you so much for watching. We feel so fortunate to be able to book such amazing guests as we're getting this thing going. One thing you could do to help us out is just engage with these videos. That will get it seen by a lot more people. We can spread the story so much further if you just give us a quick like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Anything you feel comfortable with would be a huge help. Enjoy the rest of the interview. Keeping it moving. It's cool that you've been published in different articles. The 2004 article in Blade magazine referred to knife purveyors' approach as revolutionary. Actually, no, let's back it up, because I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface yet on like how we got here, right?
Yes.
So, let's keep going with that. So, now you got the idea.
Yes.
And now we're moving on.
So what had happened was I had a chance encounter, like a fantastic encounter. A gentleman named Richard Mattei. Richard Mattei, he is my mentor. He's been my partner in business. And he actually was also a knife collector, right? So when I came back from living in Ireland, I was also working at a restaurant on Staten Island. And I met a friend of mine that I hadn't seen in years. And he and I worked together, and he goes, I have a friend of mine that you need to meet. And I got to meet Richie. And Richie when I went to his house, he had a display table as soon as you walked in with all these beautiful knives. He had artwork everywhere. He had hand-carved subas and netsuki. Here was a gentleman that was just a wealth of knowledge, and he had passion like me, right? And I guess that's why G said, man, you need to meet Richie, right? So I meet Richie, and we hit it off in a huge way. And at that time, he was like, hey, did you know that there's Blade magazine, there's Knives Illustrated, there's the Cutting Edge magazine? I had no idea there were 3 magazines dedicated strictly to knives, right? So as he and I started to become friends and started to understand that, hey, we can actually do this together, he and I actually came up with the idea of going to the largest knife show in the world, the Blade Show in Atlanta, Georgia, which was in June. It was about a little over a year away. So we had a year to actually research which makers we wanted to buy, which knives we wanted to buy, what were the trends, what was hot, what was not, right? Well, I was brand new in this industry, right? Because I just found out about it. And now it just so happens that I meet Richard, and he has been in the knife industry as a collector for many years. So that right there helped me tremendously because it fast-tracked my learning curve. I started to learn about all the different handle materials. I had no idea that there was black lip Tahitian pearl shell. Who even knew of that, right? So, there were so many materials that are being used on a regular basis in the custom knife world that I had no idea. So there was a major learning curve, but by the grace of having Richard as an influencer for me, he really fast-tracked me. I already have a high attention for detail and quality. Seeing his knives was a doorway to say, okay, well, with all the different makers out there, right? There were makers that were in that show at the Crown Plaza, but if you open that magazine or one of those 3, there are makers all throughout that magazine. And I was a little bit overwhelmed initially because I'm like, well, where do I begin, right? So I said, I need to come up with an approach that makes my decision-making worthwhile, because you could spend a lot of money on things and have a major loss because you didn't buy the right items, right? And at that time, I was still bartending. I was still waitering. Every free cent of money that I had, I was buying knives with. But I couldn't just buy any knives. I had to really, in my opinion, buy the right knives. So I came up with a 3-pronged approach that said, okay, this is my system of figuring out which makers I want to invest in. Because I want to invest in them, I want to be able to convey that information to my potential buyers so I can educate them on why I took my hard-earned money and spent it. So as I started researching the makers, I wanted to buy knives that were timeless, that were classic, something that would appeal to somebody 20 years from now, as well as 20 years ago. So when you're looking at a house, right, and you see a house has popcorn ceiling, that's a deterrent for many people for buying it because it's very much like a timestamp of when this house was built, right? Yeah. Well, the same thing can happen in the knife world where there were trends where these big blades, mirror polish, all this file work and different colored anodizing on the titanium where it's ostentatious. Well, you can look at that and say, that was from the 1980s, right? I didn't want to pigeonhole my purchases or my investments or my offerings into things like that. I really wanted to buy things that would appeal to the masses. I didn't want the laser beam technique. I wanted the floodlight technique where I turn that light on, it shines on as many people as possible. So that way you can increase the likelihood of success. So I would actually contact the different makers, ask them, what is your turnaround time? What is the demand for your knives today? What were your pricing last year? What was your pricing 5 years ago? So I can do my homework and find out, where is this person's demand? What are their prices like? Because I have to understand the value first and foremost before I can act on it, right? And so as I was making more and more calls and introducing myself to these different makers, I was really looking for the knife makers that had excellent fit and finish on their knives, right? Because I needed to understand, why did that gentleman spend $10,000 on that Ron Lake knife, right? Why? Well, to him, he valued the materials. He valued the maker. He valued the fit and finish. He valued the timelessness of the knife. So I took that one experience, and that gentleman's name was Ed Wormser, and he was one of the most influential collectors that I have ever met in the custom knife world in over 24 years of doing this. And I took that one chance encounter, and a lot of things happen in life as chance. Here's chance again, right? So I studied that and I said, okay, I want knives that are well made. I want knife makers that care about the materials they put their work into, right? So the labor is the same, right? If you're going to take an inferior piece of, like Bob Lovelace, who was the most famous knife maker, he used to buy perfectly matched sets of stag, where he would put one on the front of one knife, and then he'd put one on the front of another knife, and he'd put an inferior piece that didn't match on the opposite side of the knife. Well, when Steve Johnson joined his shop, Steve said, Bob, you're charging so much for your knives. Why not keep them matched? And Bob was like, it's just a knife. You can only see one side at a time. Well, Steve Johnson said, no, it's your time. It's your labor. It's your name on that knife. And it's your quality. Why not match them up? So I always looked for people who took the time to handpick the materials, to really take their time to finish the knives perfectly, design the knives where they were balanced open as well as closed, so that way they had the appeal. And that's how I started to narrow down whose knives I were buying. And that's how I created the three-pronged approach called the system.
So for people that don't know this market that you're talking about, it's like, when I think of a nice knife, I'm thinking of a quality knife, I'm thinking of my granddad's buck knife that he carried around, right? That was a good quality knife. Or now Forged in Fire, you have all these shows, all these independent makers that are doing Damascus steel with some imported wood. Like, is that what we're talking about? Or is it more like real art, like functional art? Or do you do both?
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because you have a standard deviation chart, right, of population on the planet, right? And the same thing happens in the knife world, right? So you have the furthest extremes as the highest quality, the piece of art that you look at it and you're like, wait, that's a knife. One of the most expensive knives I sold in 2008 was $35,000. It was made by Jim Schmidt. He was a master smith. He forged all of his own Damascus. He took 14 karat gold plates and he cut the frame out of those 14 karat gold plates. I don't know anyone at that time period that was really doing that quality of work. Well, the funny thing about that knife, you could run it across your hand and not get cut. So it was a knife by design, by function and form, but it didn't even have the ability to cut you. So that I found to be super funny to me, because for me, I want a knife that I can carry and use, right? So you have everyday carry knives, you have collectible knives, you have hunting knives, you have production knives. When you look at a buck knife, that is a production knife where the knife was designed and it was made in a production line of assembly. This goes far back as the Sheffield knives back in England's time. And one of the oldest knives that we know of, folding knife, was actually during Roman time. It was called a friction folder. And that's where the blade was extended along the spine of the knife. And when you opened it, you put your hand over that extended spine, and that's what gave the integrity of the knife. So there's so many different knives out there, and there are so many different collectors. The collectors, I like to break them down to is the person who's actually an everyday carrier and user, right? That could be anyone that wants to carry a knife. Then you have a speculator collector who says, wow, I can't believe the quality of this knife that the maker made. And it could be anything from a tactical knife to a hunting knife to a fishing knife to an art knife or a gentleman's folder. And they see the value being greater than the price that's being asked for it. So that's a speculator collector. It says, I want to buy this and hopefully it'll go up in value at a later date that I can sell it. Then you have the tried and true investment grade collectors where they pay the top dollar. They pay a fair market value for the knife based on the demand and supply and the quality of that knife. So many times those collectors, like Ed Wormser did, he paid the top dollar to get that Ron Lake knife. But guess what? His reason to come to that show was to buy that knife. So his need was met by that. So to answer your question, there is such a spectrum of knives available for everyday carry, everyday use, collector, speculative, or investment. So there's a niche inside those niches. What I try to do is buy the best knives that I can that have the broadest appeal to the collector, right? So someone who already appreciates the knife world, I love to share my knowledge and allow people the opportunity to get introduced to custom knives, because if no one knows about it, it has no value, it has no demand, right? So what I like to do is introduce, educate, get excitement there. And I tell people, don't buy anything. Don't buy anything, right? Let's figure out what your needs are. Well, if you didn't even know custom knives existed prior to meeting with me, how could you know what your need is? Let's talk a little, right? So if somebody's driving around in a Ferrari and they're wearing a Patek Philippe watch, well, maybe they should be looking at Ron Lake's knives, right? Because if that's what they already have in their repertoire of collecting experience, then we can build upon it from there. If the gentleman is a great hunter and he loves going out into the wild or safaris, well, there are knives specifically that he should have, that he should collect, right? And the only way you could ever meet somebody's need is to have this type of conversation to start it, you know, and then we can understand what it is and make an approach to help them fulfill their need.
That's cool. Yeah, it's just like when I was actually at my barber yesterday, and like every week I go in before the interview, and she's like asking me what we're talking about this week. You know, I was like, and I started to tell her about knife purveyor, and she's like, so is it like chef knives, or is it like? I was like, well, it seems like it's more like art type knives, you know, on your website, but a variety of them, but not really cooking knives. I was like, it's cool. It's something that I didn't know was there, so I'm excited to learn about it.
Well, on that topic, we've actually worked with the top chef knife makers in the world. So just because you don't see them on my site, well, actually, we just put 3 beautiful knives up on the site. Dan Thompson, he owns a company called Evolution Cutlery. And man, his stuff is mind-boggling. When I was lucky enough, chance once again, to be 3 tables down from him at the New York show, and I'm looking over at his knives, and I'm like, first thing to do, pick it up, and I'm like, wow, it feels like it's levitating in my hand. It's so well balanced. And he took some steel that was sanmai. Sanmai is a Japanese term that roughly says layered steel, right? So he had this dark sanmai Damascus center, but then he took steel that was folded with copper. It's absolutely fantastic. And what was super cool is you have this sanmai, then you have a carbon fiber bolster and a beautiful dyed wood handle. And this thing is about a $1,500 chef knife. Well, guess what? That's an amazing chef knife that truly is sharp as can be. And let's say you're having a dinner party. Why in the world would you not want to have that knife? You know what I mean? Yeah. So we once we find what people's needs are, we help fulfill them, right? And I had somebody come to the shop yesterday. He goes, I drove all the way here. And I said, well, welcome, you know. And he goes, I saw your sign saying call for an appointment first, but I just rang the bell. I said, I don't mind that you rang the bell, but what he was looking for was nothing that we had, right? So if he would have called, I would have saved him a call a trip because he came from downtown Raleigh, which is about 40 minutes away. So I don't want people to feel that they can't come here. I just want to make sure that when they come, I understand why they're coming and I can help them, or at least they understand what we offer so that way we can help fulfill the need. So he was looking for a $25 knife. I'm sorry I didn't have it, but I helped him figure exactly where to get it. And I'm happy that he's like, wow, I'm so glad I found this out. I'm going to go to Eagle One and give your cards out to the gun guys. I said, please do. That's great. So that's, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. Well, I was like, you and I had met, and then after that, I was looking for a kitchen knife for somebody. I was like, oh, I remember he said he sells knives. Let me go check out his website. And I was looking. I was like, wow, this isn't at all what I was thinking. I need to learn more about this. Like,
oh, I'm so glad you did.
But all right, so you're busting your butt, working multiple jobs, developing this system. When did you go from that to being recognized as an innovator for creating this system?
So what had happened was I went to the Blade Show. It was my first show ever exhibiting at, right? And I didn't realize it at the time when you get a table that you could have actually chose where that table was. Well, I was in the rusty knife section and I had 40 knives with me, right? And the show was huge, literally like a huge show. I didn't sell one knife. Randy, I'm thinking to myself, what the heck did I just do? Well, the whole year, right? As knives are coming in, I'm like, oh my God, this thing's unbelievable. And I'm like, wow, I'm so happy I got it. And what was interesting during that time, I ordered knives and I was very specific. I wanted a hollow grind. I wanted mirror polish. I wanted specific things. So that way it would be what I ordered. Well, I also learned at that time, just because you ask for it doesn't mean that's what you're going to get, right? So my first 40 knives that I had purchased, I'm at the Blade Show and people are walking by and we couldn't sell anything. Well, what I quickly learned is you have to adapt, right? And I was asking people questions that would give me solutions that I could follow through with, right? Well, most of my knives were in the $300 to $700 price range, right? Well, most of the people, once again, wanted much more expensive knives. The people who have money, they want to spend it, right? So I had nothing to offer them. So the very next knife I purchased was a Michael J. Smith Coke bottle, which when it's closed, it looks like a Coke bottle. It's a very, very traditional, beautiful style. That was presentation grade mother of pearl. And when you look at mother of pearl, that's actually the oyster shell that the pearls come in, right? In order to get the sizes we need in the custom knife world, the pearl shell has to be a certain amount of years old. It has to be a certain thickness, a certain quality. This was like museum quality. The colors of the rainbow in there, the fire, the depth. It was absolutely incredible. For the bolster, we used Robert Eggeling Damascus, and there's a whole assortment of Damascus just over by Travis there. And Robert Eggeling's Damascus, in my opinion, is the best, the most visual, so incredible. And so it had that as the bolster. And then for the blade, it was Devin Thomas Roses and Vines going down the blade in Damascus. It was $1,000 knife, right? My first ever $1,000 knife. I set up at Tommy McNabb's Southeast Custom Knife Show, which is literally North Carolina, right outside. It's in Winston-Salem. And I set up at that show. And that's my first time having such an expensive knife. Put it on display, and a gentleman in bib overalls with no teeth and a big beard, he's like, that's a beautiful knife. Can I see that knife? And I said, yes, sir. And I showcased it to him. I showed him. He's like, how much is this knife? Is that $1,000? Reaches in his pocket, throws 10 $100 bills. My first knife I ever sold. I was like, oh, thank God. Because, which was amazing, right? So that quickly turned into me really sharpening my pencil on figuring out who do I now have to focus my knife buying skills on, right? What approach am I going to buy on this now? Because now it's a lot more money than $300 to $700, $1,000+ knives. I said, I really have to be careful doing it this way. So I really started to research. I started buying more books. David Darum just had come out with a book called The Art and Design and Modern Fixed Blade Knives. And then he came out with The Art and Design and Modern Folding Knives. And I'm reading through that and I'm like, wow, I want to buy makers that are featured in those books, because at the same time, this TV program just came out called The Antique Roadshow. And as I was watching The Antique Roadshow, things that have provenance tend to carry more demand and more value down the line. So what I did was, you know what? I love that idea. I'm going to take that tried and true. I'm going to look for makers that are in these books. So that way I don't have to work so hard. This work has already been done. Let me get those knives. And that's what I really focused on, buying makers from those books, right? And as I was going to the Blade Show the next year, I met Steve Shackelford, who is the publisher and editor of Blade Magazine. I met Joe Kurtzman, and we were talking at the bar at the Blade Show, and I said, wow. They said, oh, it's good to see you back again. I said, well, thank you. It's my second year. And I said, well, these are the things that I've had to do to try to find a better approach. I said, there was no cookbook. There was no introduction to knife collection. There was nothing there to really help a collector or a potential purveyor get into the business. So I was telling them about the approach that I came up with, and they said, we'd love that. Can I have Mike Haskew give you a call? I said, please do. So Michael Haskew is one of the writers from Blade Magazine. He contacted me. I told him all about the approach that I've come up with, and he loved it. Well, long story short, they released that article at the next year's Blade Show.
Oh, nice.
And it was really nice, but oh my God, I can easily see why some people who become overnight successes get perceived to be like jerks. I couldn't even use the restroom. Like, I was the same guy. Before you got that article, I'm the same guy, right?
Right.
So all of a sudden, and I didn't know it was going to be released at the Blade Show, and that's everyone who's walking in there. There are thousands and thousands of people. They're getting the Blade Show magazine, and I believe we made the cover, you know, of which was really a blessing and great. And that was the beginning of the beginning, right? Because now I'm getting notoriety for an approach that actually makes sense, right? And then something really terrible happened. A client of mine passed away. And I found out like a month after he had passed, and all of the knives got sold. And that poor family got taken advantage of. I don't know how it happened, but that was the beginning of a whole nother chapter of Knife Purveyor, where I was building a name for myself, right? And I had a pretty strong mission statement. My mission statement is, do the best you possibly can by everyone, right? You know, by myself, by the collector, by the maker, right? Structured deals that benefit everyone, right? Well, I really realized that many people didn't have the ability to sell their own knives. A lot of makers are coming all the way to the show, and they're much more comfortable in front of their grinders, in front of their drill presses, in front of their machines than being in front of people, right? And you may have some amazing knives there, but because their interaction skills may not be as good as their knife making skills, I walk around the show and I would help people say at the end of the show, would you like me to help you sell that knife? Would you like me to help you sell that knife? So I created a consignment program where it allows people to do what they do best, make their knives, right? It allows me to do what I do best, sell your knives, you know, educate the buyers, get them to many shows, right? So if a knife maker can only go to 2 shows a year, but I'm going to 10, isn't that much more exposure for them, right? Or I remember I was doing business with Howard Hitchmo. He was a knife maker from England who moved to New Hampshire, and he would never discount his knives to dealers. And I'd say, Howard, out of curiosity, your biggest collector, how many knives have you sold your biggest collector? And at the time, he told me 12. I said, well, Howard, if I purchased 3 knives a year from you for the next 4 years, would I have not just been your biggest collector? And how many shows do you go to? He goes, 2. So well, I go to 10. I said, I also have a site. And he's like, well, everything I can make, I can sell. Well, I remember there was a day that Howard came over to me and he said, are you looking for more people to help sell knives? And I said, yeah. I said, but I have to be able to have some type of margin in there that's beneficial for you and beneficial for me, right? When I first started and was calling the different makers, most people were like, I'm not looking to work with anybody. The smart ones work with people because, you know, that allows more exposure. It allows, when you build good relations with people and you've proven yourself, you know, one of the hardest things to ever get done is the first deal. Because the person doesn't know who you are. The person doesn't know where you're coming from. You don't want to have, and I'm sorry if I say this, the used car guy, right? Where people feel like they're being taken advantage of. That's the worst thing. When people say, wow, I'm so happy that we finally did business, I'm like, let's do it again. And I would work with engravers, makers, I'd work with suppliers, because I would actually work it with the collector and find out they want this, right? Well, how does this become this? By communicating, by narrowing it down, by taking what's reality and possibility and being a part of the creation and being a great communicator and facilitator, I'd make things happen for people. So it got to a point where I started using my skills instead of my money to make things happen for others. And that was a major change in life for Knife Purveyor, because you only have so much money, right? So I was making the most of my time and really helping a lot of people. And I remember I even prayed on it. I'm like, God, if this is for me, keep me in it. If it's not, get me out of it. And I was very lucky to know a gentleman named Don Guild, may he rest in peace, but he was unbelievable. And he said, Michael, there's this company, institute called the Johnson O'Connor Institute. Johnson O'Connor was the head of GE as far as human resources. And he realized that people were born with God-given talents, which are basically aptitudes, right? And when your aptitudes are born to you, those are the things that you're best at. So he's like, I want to give you a gift. And I was like, well, Don, what do you mean? And he goes, I just signed you up for the Johnson O'Connor Institute. It's located in Manhattan. It's going to take 2 days for you to be studied and tested. And then 2 weeks later, they'll give you the results. So I go to the Johnson O'Connor Institute, and they're giving me all these different exams. They don't want to know anything about what I'm doing for a living. They don't want to know anything at all. They just want to see how you are at fine motor control, how you are at memory, at all these different things, right? And 2 weeks later, when I came back, they said, you're rare. I said, what do you mean? They said, you have the eye of the critic and the eye of the artist. You should be an expert selling the finest things in the planet. And I'm like, geez, what about an affirmation like that, right? So that was like, okay, well, I'm doing what I'm supposed to. But then I started getting phone calls. A lady called, her husband passed away. She had a collection of knives. I helped her with that collection. Another lady called, her father passed away. He had a collection of knives. So all of a sudden I'm getting inundated with collections, and talk about affirmation and helping people and really doing for the better of everybody. That's where it all began. From selling your first knife to kind of getting to where it is. It's been a process, really, what it has been. I remember Don Guild, once again, what an amazing gentleman. What an amazing gentleman. He said to me, Michael, David Darum, who produced the Fixed Blade, the Art and Design and Custom Fixed Blade book, he is looking to sell the knives that were, let me start from the beginning there. In order to be in David Darum's book, he asked each of the knife makers to make one knife that was given to David, and then he would document the process of that knife being made, and it would be featured in that knife maker's section of the book, along with other knives they've made. And he actually owned those knives. Well, it came to a point where he needed money to make the next book, and apparently he spoke with Don, and Don says, you should do business with Mike Donato. So I call up Israel and I speak with David Darum, and we negotiate. This is my first international deal. I buy all the knives that were made for the Art and Design and the Custom Fixed Blade book. And it was a great deal, but I thought that those pieces at the time would have sold better. I paid more than I probably should have, but it was all for the better of the knife world, because that money was going toward the next book. So, but that opened up so many doors getting that deal done, because those knives were famous. And those books were so famous that people in Italy were actually reproducing them in Italian. People in Russia were reproducing them in Russian. So now you're taking something that was only in American and English, now being published internationally, and now I owned all those knives. So that was a really important, it brought validity to what I was doing in the business itself, not just to the customers, but within, I don't know what you want to call it, but basically within the business. And that helped in a big, big way, So,
yeah. So where are you at while you're doing this? Are you still up in New York, or?
I was living in Staten Island. I just moved back from Aspen, Colorado, and I was selling art glass, I was selling prints, and I was selling knives, right? And it's a funny thing, because I wound up moving back from Aspen, Colorado to New York, and I literally lived 2 blocks from my house that I grew up in. And I'm in a basement apartment, and there's nothing on the floor to pull all this amazing art and knives and art glass. So I asked my landlord, I said, where would you go for a nice rug? And he says, you should go to Home Goods. And I'm like, I never even heard of Home Goods before, but it was literally, Home Goods was the building that I used to go to when I was a little boy, packaging up people's bags and carrying them out to the grocery store. From the grocery store, it used to be Wall Bombs turned into Home Goods. So I go to Home Goods and there's absolutely drop dead gorgeous, beautiful Asian girls walking in front of me. I go to grab the door for her and it's electronic. It opens on its own. That turned out to be my wife. So crazy.
Right.
So I'm in Staten Island. I buy the carpet and that's where I'm rebuilding Knife Purveyor. Because I went to Aspen, Colorado. Why? To be where the wealthy people are. To introduce knives. Because we need clients. Without clients, we need exposure. We need excitement, you know? When people... You ever see the movie The Nightmare Before Christmas? Mm-hmm. Well, the premise of this movie, if you haven't seen it, it's a great movie. The premise of this is Jack Skellington is the epitome of the best in the Halloween world. But he is so bored with it because he's reached the pinnacle and there's nothing more there for him. And he's seen the same old, same old. Well, we have Jack Skeletons in every industry, the collectible watch industry, the collectible car industry, people who are just looking for that spark again to get them excited that they didn't even know that this was here, right? Yep. That's my job with the custom knives, is to go to places where I'm looking for those Jack Skeletons. They already have an understanding of quality, craftsmanship, artistry, rare materials, but now seeing it in a whole new medium, that's what we're looking for, and that's what we do.
Awesome. So, did you have a storefront there in Staten Island? And are you online at this point? Like, when did you start putting it all online?
We started putting everything online. I think it was, let's see, that's a very good. The current website is the fourth or fifth iteration of knifepurveyor.com. I remember the internet in college. I graduated in 98. The internet wasn't really much of a thing at that point. You had to like dial in and do all this other stuff. Well, I found out, I think it was like 2000, Y2K, we found out that the internet was actually the way to go, right? Because I remember thinking, everyone in the knife world who sells knives, they're called knife purveyors. You know, oh, you know Gary Shaw, the knife purveyor, you know, Hank Ramel, the knife purveyor, Steve Berg, like these were all knife purveyors, right? So I went online and I'm like, knifepurveyor.com did not exist. So I wound up buying.
Now you get to be the knife purveyor.
Yeah. Well, customknives.com was already sold to Jeff Harkins. So I was like, what else? I'm like, knifepurveyor.com. So I bought that website name.
So you weren't the first one to do it, right?
No. Arizona Custom Knives was a husband and wife team out of Arizona. They were Daniel O'Malley, who owns Blade Gallery. He was a computer whiz to a degree. He was actually the first person in the custom knife world building websites for the makers, and also building websites for the dealers. Gary Levine, Gary Shaw, Hank Ramel. They all had their own, like Don Guild had his own website, Walter Hoffman did. So these were all purveyors. So I wound up buying the company, buying the name knifepurveyor.com, and also a bunch of different iterations of it just to be on the safe side. Well, I hired a company. It was an individual gentleman to design Knife Purveyor, and that was our introduction to the knife world. And I remember how much time it was taking I did everything, right? I had a photo set up. I would be taking photos. I'd have a mouthpiece on. I'd be answering the phones. I'd be wrapping up boxes to be shipped out. I'd be doing every aspect of it. And I remember saying, man, going to these knife shows, as cool as it is, it's a lot of work. And you're not guaranteed to sell anything, as we saw at the Blade show. And, so I'm like, there's got to be a better way. Well, as the website starts getting up some speed, I started researching where do people buy knives from, right? So there was this thing called were different forums that focused on knives. And I was going to those forums just saying, hey, I'm Michael Donato. I own knifepurveyor.com. If you're interested, if you're looking for anything or I can help you in any way. So I was doing a lot of the legwork at the time. And all of a sudden, it started to actually come in at a nice speed. I had a very large collection come in from a gentleman. Sadly, he was diagnosed with cancer. And he said, I don't want to leave these as a burden for my family. And I helped him sell the entire collection. So word of mouth, doing things the right way, taking care of people, doing what you say you're going to do, this is the foundation of being a good businessman. And that's how I built my company. You know, I would always underpromise and overdeliver. And if I did drop the ball, take responsibility for dropping the ball. There's nothing wrong with telling someone, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out the answer. Or if you misspeak, correct it as quick as possible.
Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. Own it.
Without question. It's much better to talk less and listen more. And it's better to think before you speak. Those are some really important things that I would say. I know that one of the questions you had is, how do you, what are some things that you would project to others who want to be successful? Well, there was a gentleman, Don Gild, once again. He basically said to me, Michael, you're going to realize this sooner or later. You're great at doing X, Y, and Z. What's the best use of your time? Yeah. What shouldn't you be doing? What do you stink at? Right? You're not an accountant. You don't even like it. That's costing you money by wasting that time doing it. Get a great accountant. You want a great bookkeeper? Get a great bookkeeper. You want a great photographer? Get a great photographer. Let people who do what they do best do what they do best. You do what you do best, and now you're all doing it at the best level, and that's what creates synergy. That's what creates effectiveness, and that's something that I would recommend to anyone who's watching this video. What's the best use of your time? Elevate what you do to the best ability, what makes you the most money, what you're best at, what you like doing the best. The stuff you hate at, don't do it at all. Don't forget about it.
Yeah.
Get it done for those who do it best. That's
100%. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing, especially when you go from doing everything yourself to now, all right, I don't have time. There's no way I can do everything myself and do it great.
right.
Now it's like figuring out what to get rid of. And it's like, we talk about, because you hear it all the time, don't chase the money, chase the business, chase this, chase that. And it's like, when you don't have money, that's something that's hard to understand. Or when you're building a business, what do you mean don't chase the money? I'm trying to pay my bills. But everything you're talking about right now is the definition of that. If you're doing all these things in order, taking care of business, taking care of people, having self-respect and being honest with yourself, the money will follow.
Yes, without question. And it will follow as long as your approach is sound, right?
100%.
If you're going to sell a widget, make sure the widget is something somebody actually wants, needs. There's got to be, if you studied business, right? And I didn't study business at all, right? There's service industries. There's, I don't know. But basically, there's a need. Whatever you're going to do, make sure it's thought out to the point where you're saying, if I'm going to put my time into it, that it's going to be received well by whoever your audience is. And that audience is going to support it. And if you're going to put your time and effort into it, why not think it through first? It's much easier to recapture. Time is a tough thing because you can count your money, but you can't count your time, right? But it's much better to think things through and actually come up with a lesson plan or a game plan or a business plan and think it through first. Create goals. Goals are there for a reason. If you can have immediate goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, benchmarks. Make your goals challenging, but base them on reality too. So that way you can at least see where you're going and have direction. And it's also important to look back because sometimes you need to change where you're going, right? So it's important to self-reflect too.
100%. A branding question. So before knifepurveyor.com, what were you? Would you call yourself? Was it just Mike Donato? Like, how were you known in the industry?
It was actually Don Maxwell. A lot of these knife makers, when you would buy a knife or request, in order to be a part of the Knife Makers Guild of America, you had to be a knife maker. You had to create a catalog, right? And I remember actually paying people for their catalogs to send them to me. And Don Maxwell created all these beautiful drawings line drawings of what the knives that he would produce, right? And you could change it any way that you wanted. It's part of custom knives. And there was this just blade profile that I loved. I absolutely loved it. And I showed it to Richie. He goes, "That's a great one." And I said, "Let me ask Don if I can use it." So he said, "Yeah, no problem." And my original business card just said, Michael A. Donato, Purveyor of Fine Custom Knives, and it had the knife on it. It was just, and Richard had Richard F. Matei, Purveyor of Fine Custom Knives, with the same knife without phone number. And that was how it first started with the branding. And if you look, that is the line drawing of the knife from Don Maxwell, and it's just progressed further and further from that to actually. There was a really interesting gentleman, and I'm sorry I cannot remember his name, but Stephen Miglio is his name. He designed the three guys dancing on Tommy Boy's record label. That's what he designed. Well, being in the restaurant industry, I used to bartend and waiter with Steve Miglio. And this was, I would guess, maybe early 2000. I asked Steven to help me design my logo, and he was the one that came up with the knife Purveyor.
Okay. That's cool. So then you found knifepurveyor.com, and did you lean into a major rebrand, or it was just still Mike Donato of knifepurveyor.com? Like, how much did you push on the .com?
At the time, it was instrumental too, because everything that was called the .com. What was it? What do they call that? The boom. Yeah, the .com boom. So, and thank God the .com happened, because going to knife shows, being away from your family, the expense of being there, the amount of pressure before a show is huge, because if you have 1,000 knives and you can only bring 100, which of those do you bring to the show, right?
Right.
So, to not to go off on a tangent, but with Knife Purveyor, you had a knife show every day, 24 hours a day, right? Yeah. So at that time, like I said, I was doing all my own photography. Holy cow. Talk about not the best use of my time. I didn't know what I was doing. I was teaching myself, because I was on a shoestring budget. I was trying to I was doing every aspect of the business myself, right? But thank God I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So when it came to branding, we did use knifepurveyor.com. Once we came up with the logo, just the logo itself, that was at the top of it, and we were trying to, Michael Weissman was a collector in New York City. When I was selling knives, he goes, "How come you don't give me a receipt? How come there's no write-up on a knife?" There's nothing. So because of Michael Weissman, I made it a point. At that point, any knife that we sold, we'd include photos right up of the knife, our logo, and that's where the branding really started to. And we would also ship it to them in a sheet protector, so that way they can keep their collection in a binder, right? Right after that, I wound up getting these little Band-Aid dispensers with my company logo on it. Why not make somebody smile when they get the knife, Yeah. Now you give them the Band-Aid with Knife Purveyor with the phone number and all, and people would tend to keep that, right? It's something that is clingy. It's something that they would actually hold on to. Did you? People are actually taking the knives, the papers, and my little Band-Aids, taking pictures. Just got this from Knife Purveyor. And I'm like, forget it, that's great,
Yeah.
So we tried, we had these little pens made up that had Knife Purveyor logo on them with a little flashlight. We've done all different types of things, mostly giveaways, to allow people to know that they're appreciated for doing business with us, and we even have boxes now. When you open up a box for Knife Purveyor, it has a handwritten thank you note from me on there, and it's got our logo. Our zipper cases have our logo. We've even made cloths. Hey, we even just made these recently, just why not, to have something cool, because collecting isn't, you can buy anything you want in life, right? It's about the experience. It's about, Robert Brown said it best. Robert Brown came to the New York Custom Knife Show. I invited him. He came from Cincinnati, Ohio. He came and he smiled ear to ear, saying, "I'm finally not alone. There are other people out there just like me," right?
Yeah.
That love knives. John Early, same exact line. So when you find your tribe, what a great thing it is to elevate each other. And what a cool experience it is to be a part of the custom knife world. I can say that the people that we've met over the years, between the makers, the collectors, the finest people I've ever met, really.
Yeah. Are you the one that writes all the descriptions for the knives on the website?
I don't. It's not a really good use of my time. When I do write a description, those knives tend to sell pretty quickly, though.
Yeah.
So that right there, I think that is a good use of my time.
Yeah,
I guess.
I was just wondering. I mean, your website's so well done, and it's like, the descriptions, everything is so articulate. Like, it's whether you're doing it or not, it's very well put together, and
Thank you.
Makes it easy to understand, especially looking at something like that for the first time. You get a pretty good understanding of what everything is and what you're doing. I guess, when did you end up in North Carolina?
My wife, she was a school teacher. She was at Home Goods because it was spring break, and she had just purchased a place on Staten Island. And long story short, we hit it off in a great way, and we're like, I don't want to be on Staten Island. She goes, I don't want to be on Staten Island either. So we were looking at potential places to move to, and very family based, right? Her relationship with her mom and dad and her sister, my relationship with my family, very strong, right? That's the most important thing to me, most important thing to Jasmine. So when we were moving off of Staten Island, we actually moved to Maryland, and sorry, Maryland, you weren't for us. It wasn't for us. But Jasmine's best friend lived here, and they were looking for school teachers in a big way. So we came down and we got an interview, and she was hired on the spot, which was great. So we wound up moving right off of Falls of Neuse in an apartment, because we didn't know if we were going to love it down there or not. We didn't want to just buy anything. So we moved down there. And Jasmine is commuting to Garner, right by Jones Dairy over that way, which is a long commute, right? We wound up buying a beautiful home. And when I bought the home, I kept in mind I needed a workspace, right? One that was just dedicated for photography and everything, which was wonderful. So we moved there, and that was in 2007. And we've been here since 2007, and we've moved. Once I found out that we were going to have a baby, I needed to separate church from state. Right. So I didn't want to work from home and have the baby at home. I wanted to make sure to be at home, be with the family, be at work, and be at work. So I wound up buying Knife Purveyor's first headquarters. It was a 6-minute drive, 7-minute drive if the light was red, which was perfect timing. Right. It was about a 1,300 square foot property with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. I made the living room my office. We dedicated the master bedroom to the photography and shipping center. So we actually used the rooms accordingly for what the needs were. And I have a wonderful gentleman, Bobby, who's my assistant. He's been with me forever, really, which is, since 2007. And that was really, really where efficiency came into play, because now not only am I not doing it myself, I have assistants, we have space, and that's when things really started to burn in a good way, like cooking with gas in a big way, because now we had a place that if people came to town and they wanted to come and sit down and relax, and that's where the idea of this room came from, is I love the ability to make people comfortable, enjoy it. Like, if you come and you like what we like, wow, amazing. You don't have to buy anything, but if you're enjoying the experience, ultimately we need sales, but it's about the experience, and that's where it comes from, right? And when people come here and they're like, that gentleman yesterday, he was blown away. He had no idea. Yeah. He's like, I'm like, well, come, you're here now. We're not here to put anyone off at all. But at the same breath, if you don't know what you're coming to see,
right.
That's why we ask for an appointment. And that way we can talk to you first. Make sure we understand what you're looking for. Make sure you understand where you're coming to. And that way we can make it a great experience. Because when people do come and it is what they wanted, they're like, when are we coming back?
Right. And you got to make sure it's a good use of their time, but also a good use of your time, because you're busy enough.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I'm going to take us off topic for a second, because this is something that I've been talking with my staff about. It's like, how did you decide to hire an assistant? Like, I'm struggling with it, because like, I always want to make sure all my people are taken care of first. And like, I always carry the biggest load.
Yes.
And then, so I hired Travis, and then, I was like, all right, next I'm going to hire an assistant. Well, I didn't. I was like, all right, Travis needs help. Let's hire him somebody. So we just brought Logan on. He's out today. I was hoping you were going to meet him as well. But
But
so he's working with us now, and now it's like, all right, next I need to hire an assistant. But it's like I can't convince myself that my time's that valuable. Like, how? Talk me through that for you.
that's a really difficult thing, because when you're the go-getter, right? You're the person that the entrepreneurial spirit is not in everyone, right? Not everyone has the ability to do what we do, right?
100%.
So, and it gets to a point where there are certain things you should touch, and there are certain things you should no longer touch, right? And that gets back to the best use of your time, best use of my time, best use of Travis's time, right? I still battle with that, even though it's been 24 plus years, right? And that's because of, I would say that I am a perfectionist to a degree on certain things, and just because it's my way doesn't. Here's what I would say: if the goal is clear and clearly defined, there's many ways to get to that goal, right? So when I tell the boys, the guys that are working here with me, under promise, over deliver, right? When you're on the phone and you just got that deal done and the guy's happy as you are, he'll be just as happy to know that that's being packed up tomorrow and will be sent out, versus today when we already have 13 packages going out today. Now you just added to the confusion and stress in your own office, where if you handle, there are certain things that I touch and there are certain things that I don't want to touch at all anymore, right? Because it's not good use of my time, right? So the first thing is to really introspectively look upon myself, yourself, right? And say, what do I love doing? Which use of my time makes the company the most money? That way, we can say, okay, I can really focus on X, Y, and Z. A, B, and C, I can do that. Boy, I shouldn't be doing that. You know what I mean? And that's where you have to make, it's like a pizza, right? You got to make your slices and figure out really whose slice is going to go to where, and which really is the best position to fill that with, right? So if you surround yourself with really fine people who know what they're best at, and you put them in a position for them to shine brightest, you're doing the best for you and them at that same time. So I would say that is a huge step in getting an assistant, right? And saying, okay, I can do this, 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 and this, but I shouldn't. But here's the other part of it. Here's a caveat. If you tell someone or ask someone to do it, let them do it.
No, 100%.
Let them do it. You know, don't all of a sudden say, well, I asked and it hasn't been done, and all of a sudden you do it. Then it's being counterproductive. And I say that because I think it's important to have meetings too, right? And everyone's on the same page and saying, okay, we have this coming up. We have this going on. This is a high priority. We need this to be done as soon as possible. This is a back burner deal. And that way communication's clear, because it's hard enough to communicate with yourself one-on-one, right? Just like introspectively. Then when you bring in a secondary party, you're trying to communicate, and there could be interference there, right? Now you have 3 or 4 people. So we try to limit that interference, right? And we don't want the meeting to be 3 hours. We want it to be 30 minutes. Right? And what we hand off at the end of that meeting, we want to know, where are we on that next week? Did we proceed with that? Is that done? And that way you're starting to create little treasure maps, right? And by figuring out what you want, is going to be a first part of your treasure map of what do you want for an assistant? What are your needs? And then you're going to find the skill sets that meet those needs. And that's the first step of finding a good assistant, you know?
Yeah.
And it's very important also, not only that person has to be good at those, you have to get along with those people. You know what I mean? You're going to have intrepidation. There's going to be days that things just don't go well. There are times that somebody did something the way that I wouldn't have done it, but they had their best intention because it meets the goal of what our mission is. But you got to really, and I think it's important to give people enough space, but also to give them the tools for success with proper direction. And, you know, that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I always tell all my employees, like, you know, we know how things need to be done. How you get there, that's up to you. But when I ask you why you did it that way, you better have an answer.
Yes.
Right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's like, as long as they're thoughtful about what they did, whether right, wrong, or indifferent from how I would have done it, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
So yeah, that was a game changer for me.
That
figuring
is.
out, because you think that you're delegating, right? But when you're hovering or doing too much oversight, are you really delegating?
Right.
And then once you figure out how to let go of that, holding on to it, it has to be done my way. My way's the right way. Now it's life changing. Now you get so much of your time back and just clear headspace too, because I'm not constantly worried about, is it getting done right?
Right.
You know.
And that right there, the letting it go is a huge, huge thing. But you have to have the, you have to, as the entrepreneur, as the business owners, you have to have the communication, and you have to have the vision, and you have to have the ability to convey it to your, no one works for me. We all work together here, right? So when I'm speaking with Ethan, I'm like, hey, Ethan, this is something we need to have done today, right? This needs to be done. If you want to bounce some ideas off me, if you need help with it, I'm right there. But this is the goal, and this is the time frame. How you get there, if there's any static, any bumps in the road, bring it back to me, right?
Right.
And it's amazing, because a lot of things, how about that? A lot of things have been done ways I wouldn't have, but now it's the way we do it now. So there's a lot of validity to having let go,
100%. Yeah. You brought up your kids a couple times. Your wife, you and your wife have two amazing kids, but you're in an industry where the only way to really do it is to build these relationships. So you're on the road a lot, right?
Yes, very much.
How do you balance that? Because you're a good attentive father, how do you maintain that balance?
It starts at home. It starts at home first with my wife, right? I couldn't ask for a better wife. I couldn't ask for a better wife. So Jasmine was inducted into the Hall of Fame for tennis. Prior to her playing tennis in Manhattan College, no man, no woman won more than 84, 86 matches. She won 126 matches. So she is very, very driven. She is the master of time and space. Most people, when we're at a gymnastics meet or hockey, they'll ask me questions. I'm like, submit it to the boss, please. And she'll be like, why don't you know that? I'm like, well, because you know that, right? You do that best. You stick with that, right? And she always laughs, and she's like, I don't understand why you don't know this stuff. And I'm like, because it's important for you to handle, right? It's very important, because what I don't know, my concept of time is terrible, right? Because I'm being pulled in so many directions, right? So when it comes to family, Roger Ball, great gentleman. Before Julia was born, one of the most beautiful things that I've had in this business is the people we've met. You've already heard names during this conversation alone. Roger Ball was instrumental in the separation between church and state. Having family time, family. Respect the family. Respect the business unless family calls. And then, it's more important. There are going to be times that I have to excuse myself from family, but those are really important reasons, right? And there's many times that I stop everything from work for family. So it's a litmus test. There's a balance, and you have to have flexibility with anything that you do, right? So there are times where I'm working on a pretty important deal that I may need to step away for 10 minutes from my family, but that 10 minutes allows the rest of that day to be there with them, or for me to drop everything that I do to be with my family. So as long as your priorities are clear and concise, and you're on the same page with your family and the people that work here, that's all part of the structure. The foundation that holds everything up is built on communication. It's built on goals. It's built on understanding. It's built on flexibility. So there are certain things Richie will say to me, dude, I don't know anyone who travels and does as much family things as you do. I'm not saying that's wrong. I said, most people don't ever get that opportunity. God bless you that you do. And I'm like, well, I structure it that way, right? Can I make more money? Yes. But can I relive that minute that just passed, or I just missed my son's game, or I just missed that opportunity to cheer my daughter on in gymnastics? that stuff, the kids are kids for such a short period of time that my priorities, it's got to be a sliding scale, right? When certain priorities, I'm getting ready for the biggest show. I got to be ready for that. Well, if Andrew gets sick, I'm sorry, I got to be with my son. You know, and if something comes up, you got to have flexibility. But as long as there is the foundation's there, and the foundation needs to be reassessed too, because sometimes things shake and move, you know, and you gotta keep the communication with your family the most open. You know, when most children today, they don't talk, right? Most children, they don't. When I'm in the car with my son and we have to drive 45 minutes to hockey practice, that's a lot of family time, but also there's a lot of learning time there for Andrew. I'll make business calls. I'll introduce my son to whoever I may be speaking to on the phone. So that way he can hear what's going on. He can give a chance to speak, say hello to whoever may be on the phone. And I do a lot of that intentionally. So that way it helps foster communication skills with Andrew, listening skills with Andrew or with Julia. You know, so there's a lot of times that I'll mix and match, even though there's supposed to be separation there. But it's there for a reason, that mix and match. And I think that as long as the flexibility is there, but the goal is true, you can deviate at times. It's just a matter of rolling with it. And most successful people, you have to fly by the seat of your pants. But as long as you're flying with a goal and you're getting to that goal and getting closer to it, you're doing it.
Yeah.
So
I like that. I try to bring my kids in on what I'm doing as much as possible, because if I am gone, then they understand why, because they've seen what I do on a daily basis, and they get it a little bit more.
Yes.
Then they're able to, instead of getting mad about it, they're asking questions about it. Like,
yes.
Well, what'd you do? You know, and like they want details now. Even my youngest kids, like,
Beautiful.
and it's great. I enjoy it. You know, they like coming into the office and working and helping out, and especially now that we're doing all this stuff. It's
Yes.
like, you know. My boy wants to come in and hold the camera, do B-roll. Like, it's like, yeah, it's just being around it. It's so important. And then what they decide to do from there, you know, who knows? But
100%.
Seeing what it takes to be successful, I think, is real important.
What I try to convey to Andrew and Julia, Andrew is 13 and Julia is 15, is you can do whatever you'd like in this world. But the traditional way of life is you get up at a certain time, you have to be somewhere at a certain time, and then you come home. But during that time, you're dedicated to everything that you're doing for whatever that position is of time, right? I said, when you look at us, we literally were in Japan for 17 days. We were in Belize for 10 days. We just come back from Ontario and Niagara Falls. We've just come back from Lake Placid and Montreal. We travel a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I said, if I was a traditional worker, for lack of a better term, most people get 2 weeks off, if that, or maybe 3 weeks. I said, well, because time, we never ever get back, it's how you use that time. And I prefer to focus my time on the family when I have the family here, when I can do what I can do. Otherwise, when I'm at work, I'm focusing on do whatever I can to meet my clients' needs. You know, we created something called the mission of love. No one has ever done anything like this in the custom knife world. We build a relationship with the client. We already have that relationship. People call me all the time. We talk about so many different things, knife related and other related, right? But when it comes to knives, they know that what I say is, to the best of my knowledge and from my expertise, I am biased. I'm telling you from over 24 years of doing this and experiencing this that I can only give you the advice that you're asking from my experience. So when I created this thing called the mission of love, it was when people were being taken advantage. And I'm not saying it was being taken advantage within the knife world. If someone doesn't know anything about it, and let's say you tell your wife, oh, I got that for $10. You know, the first thing in the mission of love is, please, Lord, do not let my wife sell my knives for what I told I paid for them. That's the first thing in the mission of love, right? So if you've told your wife that you paid $10 for something and she gets 5 for it, she thinks she's doing pretty good. But in all reality, if you paid 10 grand for that, she just got destroyed, right?
Right.
So many collectors not only collect knives, but they may have hundreds of knives. In all honesty, they may have watches, they may have cars, they may have all different things, but they may just have knives. When it comes to the knives, I have them send me their knives. I inspect them. I take care of them, make sure they're oiled, they're waxed. If there's any little issues that may need to be addressed, I already have relationships with my makers who can review those, correct them, make everything right. And we document it. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road. We give them a complete portfolio of what their knives are and what their value is today, right? I'm a bald guy. I can't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you the future, but I can tell you based on what the market is today, this is the value. God forbid anything happens to you as the collector in your will, with your accountant, with your lawyer, you can leave this Michael Donato knife purveyor. We already negotiated all the terms. He will take care of the knives for the family. And at the time of selling any knife, we will evaluate the values of those knives because the market's constantly changing. So that way it'll properly reflect what's going on in the market. And now, because that could be a substantial amount of money, right? Now, I had a lady tell me it was like winning the lottery. I didn't even buy a ticket. When I helped her, she kept getting checks and checks and checks. Well, that's something to me is the best thing I can do at the end of the day for my clients because now they're protected and their family's protected. And that's something we developed that no one has before. So
is that is it kind of like a pamphlet like you'd see at a higher end estate auction, like that kind of thing where it talks about value and gives a description of the items? Is it kind of like
everything
that?
Digitalized? Yeah, we used to do everything printed, but
I think they're doing it all digital now too.
Everything is digital. So it's basically what it is it'll be, and here's the coolest thing too, right? They send us all the knives. We enter everything into our database. We create an entire, as if we're selling the knife, even though we're not. So we're entering all the data, who made the knife, the materials, the size, the weight, all the photography. So we have all of that saved behind the scenes. We do the price, the value of this knife is between this range and this range. That's what the market value is of that knife. And then we send them the digital file or the data traveler, and they have all that information. Let's just say, for instance, he had a Ron Lake knife that he had for, it was a $10,000 knife. And I don't have any Ron Lake knives currently at all. But a guy wants one. I can look at my database, who has a Ron Lake knife? And I can just say, hey, Randy, you have a Ron Lake knife. Do you still love it? Yes? Okay, don't even worry about it. No? Well, we got a guy's looking to buy it. So now it allows me to capitalize for you and me and offer something that I didn't have to a client who wants it. Yeah. So it creates it creates work up front. It creates an exit strategy on the back, but it also creates potential in the middle. So now you're really offering something that no one's done before.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So when you say they're sending the knives, are they're physically sending all your knives?
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah. And
so you handle all of these.
It's amazing. It's sometimes not so amazing because I have 49-year-old eyes. The gentleman had 86-year-old eyes, right? And in his opinion, everything was mint and beautiful. When I got them, in his defense, every knife that he would purchase, all he would do is put it in this glass display case. He never oiled it. He never dusted it. He never did anything, right? He just put them in there. Well, when I got the knives, there were so many little issues that I'm like, and when I sent him close-up so he can easily see, he goes, I didn't see that. And I said, I know you didn't see it. I'm just bringing it to your attention. It's part of our service to say, hey, these things can be remediated. If that was left alone and continue, it may cause it to be damaged, and then you can't sell it. Then you lose the value because collectible items are driven by the collector, and certain collectors want things to be as excellent and fine, pristine. Well, you have to take that in consideration when you look assessing the value of an item is its condition. Condition is super important. Who made the knife, the materials used, and the subject matter. If somebody's famous for X, but this was made by him and it's a real rarity, that may only be really desirable to a small portion of that collection, right? The guy that has all of those and he doesn't have that, to him it may be, but to him he may not want it. It's not representative of what he's known for. So it's a case-by-case basis, and it's the true supply-demand market that's being driven by the collectors. And that's what people tend to forget. They're like, well, this one lady, and I'm not going to say her name, I helped her and her husband with a mission of love. And I told them everything that I just told you. And it's all in writing. And she's like, well, you appraised it at this. I want to sell it for that. And I said, well, that was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
The market has changed. I don't care about that. I want that out of it. I said, but it's not, you're not really, the market is what drives the market. If all of a sudden the rarest of the rarest, there's 3 guys looking for this rarity and they're fighting against each other to get it and they're creating that demand, and all of a sudden a huge collection and people didn't know about those 3 guys hits the marketplace and it floods the market and all those guys' needs finally get met, and now there's all this inventory just sitting there. Well, now those knives aren't valued because they're not being driven by those collectors anymore.
Yep.
So, it's really got to be handled properly, and you got to know who's looking, who knows, who wants. There's many people out there that if they found out about this custom knife world, they would go nuts. And we wouldn't have enough knives.
Right.
And that's my job, to introduce, to expose, to educate, and I met a gentleman the other day. We were talking about creating your own opportunities. I was in Staten Island coming back from the New York Custom Knife Show. It's 12 o'clock in the evening. I just left a dear friend's house. And as I'm driving down the street past a bagel place, brand new Lamborghini, right in front of the bagel place. I'm on the phone with a client. He's in California. I'm like, Larry, I got to call you back. So I make a U-turn and I pull up right next to his car. I walk into the bagel place. There's nobody in there but the owner. And I said, is that yours? He goes, no, it's a client outside. So I go outside and now sitting on a bench is a guy just puffing on a cigarette and drinking an iced tea. And I said, is this yours? He goes, yes, it is. I said, you like nice things. I said, congratulations. It's beautiful. I said, I just come back from Greenwich, Connecticut. I have some really fantastic knives in my car. He goes, you have knives in your car? I said, yes, I do. I said, do you like knives? He goes, yes, I do. So at 12 o'clock in the morning in Staten Island, I open up my case and I'm starting to show him knives. I was there for 2 hours with him showing him knives. And he was like, I had no idea that this even existed. I get a message from my wife. She goes, I don't see you at your mom's house. I see you at Hot Bagels. What are you doing at Hot Bagels? And I'm like, I said, I'll tell you later. But it's opportunities like that, that you have to pounce on. And if I just drive past that car, I never meet that gentleman.
Yep.
So you have to look at things that are coming your way. And, there's an old, really interesting joke about Jesus and a man. And the man's like, I'm going to be saved by Jesus, right? And the flood's coming in and it's coming up to his waist. And this guy comes by with a little boat and says, come on in. He goes, no, Jesus is going to save me. And all of a sudden, the water's getting higher and higher. And the guy comes by with another boat. Come on. He goes, no, Jesus is going to save me, right? Then a helicopter comes. He's almost floating, like water's come. And he's like, we both going to save me, right? So last thing, he dies and he sees Jesus. He goes, I thought you were going to save me. He goes, well, I sent the guy with the raft. I sent the guy with the boat. I sent the guy with the helicopter. The time you got to see these opportunities and act on them too. You can't just wait. So that's what I'm like infamous for. I was getting on an elevator one time and the head coach for a hockey team was on that elevator. And I see him and I'm like, how are you? And I'm with Richie Matei. And I immediately show him something. And he's like, wow, that's cool. I didn't even know that existed, right? So we exchanged phone numbers and all. And he goes his way. He was actually in town to watch his son play the New York Rangers. He was on the LA Kings. And next thing you know, I call him a few days later and we do a business deal. Well, if you don't just, you got to follow it through. You got to take shots sometimes. You know what I mean? And as long as your approach is one that you wouldn't mind being done to you, then what's wrong?
Did you sell anything to the guy at the bagel shop that day?
Not yet.
You notice how many people he told, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like people get lost on that moment where, well, he's probably not going to buy anything right now. I'm busy. Why do I want to spend 2 hours at a bagel shop? But you don't know what that's going to turn into down the road.
The one thing I would tell you, though, is if you do put your time into it, if you only give your card to someone, you've lost 100% of the control. I always ask for some type of contact information because then me being a I like to follow through and follow up. I will just either send a quick message. It was nice meeting you. If I can be of any assistance. I have a little video that I created of knives that when people, it's a quick 30 seconds, I send that to them as well. So that way they can get a little peek at what we truly do. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with planting these seeds, because I'll tell you, even at my mother's house in New Jersey, where all they have is stones, and underneath that is all black, like tarp, we have some flowers growing out of those stones, you know, so those seeds get there, you know, they grow some way. So
That's right.
you know,
What's the coolest collection or the most awesome collection you've ever got to see or handle?
wow. So I was at the Knife Makers Guild show in Orlando, Florida. At the time, Jim Schmidt, the guy that I told you about earlier, that the knife wasn't even sharp, the dagger, the gold, his stuff was pistol hot, right? You had Matteo Ulanasi, you had Walter Samashini, you had Ed Wormser, and multiple collectors worldwide looking for these Jim Schmidt knives. Jim Schmidt made far less than 400 knives, and I would rather overestimate than say a number that's lower than it truly is. But he made a lot less than 400 knives total. And they were putting together a book called the Master Jim Schmidt book. So they're all competing with each other to try to find these knives to put them in the book, right? So there was this gentleman, his name was Paul Lansing. Paul Lansing's grandfather was best friends with Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie was the steel baron of America, right?
Sure.
And in order to create iron to steel, or to change iron to steel, you had to add some type of the chemical chart from like the periodic table. And Lansing supplied all of that to Carnegie. So they both became very, very, very wealthy. Well, Paul Lansing would always show up at the knife shows with his display, nothing for sale. He would never, ever, ever sell. But he had some of the most desirable pieces. And I'm like, come on, dude, you're showing me these beautiful pieces and I can't even buy one. Well, finally, the time came that he would sell me one. He sold me this beautiful push dagger by Jim Schmidt. And the head of the push dagger was a beautiful rattlesnake. And I'm like, I got it, right? So who do I call? Call my friend Ed. And I'm like, Ed, I got it. Sell it to him immediately. Done deal, right? So Paul Lansing is getting sick, sad to say. And I get a phone call from him and he says, I would really like for you to come to Michigan and help me with my collection. So I drop everything. I figure out time frame, have an assistant with me. We get to his house. We're there for a whole week.
Wow.
Whole week documenting his collection, entering all the, and here's where it was like unbelievable to me, right? The amount of knives. And here's a guy that not just loved knives of every caliber. Like he would have these, he would travel the world and he would have these letter openers, handmade letter openers from all around the world. If he had 50, he had 100. You know what I mean? Like just letter openers. Then he had these Japanese samurai swords and like his entire bedroom was filled with Japanese artifacts and Chinese artifacts. And it was like walking into a museum. His house was out of this world. And as I'm trying to help him, he's such a collector. It was the most difficult thing I ever had to do in the custom knife world because I'm there with a week period of time helping him and I'm cataloging everything. So that way they have a list of everything that's leaving their house, but I'm also having everything sent with me, right? And as I'm entering all this information, he'd be like, I don't want to sell this. And like, I just did all this work and he's pulling pieces back and I'm like, you do yours, no problem. But his wife is like, we want these things. Maybe this is a part that shouldn't be on the recording, but like it was tough because I just needed to be left alone and do my job. And he was literally, I would say, probably could have got all the work done if that didn't happen. It kept happening.
Right.
You know?
But that's part of it, though. I bet he was telling you stories the whole time.
Yes.
Too, right?
Yes.
That was the upside of that.
That was a
and
great.
Like, yeah, it takes longer, but nobody else is ever going to be able to tell you those stories. And now you got your provenance and now you got your value.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And that would be, I would say, the most interesting collection, but the coolest opportunity I ever had in the custom knife world. We were doing business with a gentleman named Sergei Mishov out of Russia. And Carlos Lopez, who's a dear friend of mine, he owns Knife Treasures. I helped him build his collection. I helped him get the website going because I was selling a bunch of knives for him. I'm like, Carlos, you could sell your own knives, right? So great friend of mine. We're doing business with Russia, and the guy is about to celebrate his 10th year in business. So he invites us to the party. So Carlos and I, we go fly to Moscow and then fly to Russia, fly to St. Petersburg.
Wow.
And while we're there, Sergey introduced us to Yuri, and Yuri was the curator of Peter the Great's Edged collection. They opened up the back vault of the Hermitage Museum for Carlos and me for 6 hours.
Wow.
And Yuri's like, you can handle anything you'd like. Put these special gloves on me. He's like, pick something out, I'll tell you about it. Pick out something. So I pick out this beautiful samurai sword. It's got carved dragons and ivory. And I showed it, and he goes, you got great taste. Right? And it was a gift from the Emperor of Japan to Peter the Great. And like that, to me,
Wow.
was super, super cool.
So it was such a appreciation for the art in it, or I guess the artistry and the pieces themselves. Like, how do you keep from getting attached to them and be able to pass those through?
Well, it goes back to the family. It gets back to I love what I do. I love the items that I sell, but it's such a small group of people that it's what I have to do in order to keep the balls and all the things. If I was a multi-millionaire, maybe I wouldn't have to. I would just create galleries and museums for these items.
Yeah.
But it's my job to be a steward, to find them, to help people who've appreciated them, to recapture their value and to pass it on to the next person. And the beauty of it is I keep records of everything. So there's been many times that I've contacted people and gotten pieces back. I commissioned a piece for a client of mine, and it was a King Tut knife, and there was over 7 ounces of 24 karat gold in the piece alone. And the engraver is no longer engraving today. And at the time it was $25,000 just for the engraving, not to mention all the gold. And I was able to purchase that piece back. And I've been offered over $40,000 for that knife. And I'm like, no, I'm not selling it for that. If you want it, you're going to have to pay for it. So there are times that I have things that, if I don't get my number, I don't care. It's mine. I'm enjoying it. But then there comes a time where we got, gymnastics fees, we got hockey fees, we got, everything else that, there are times that I have to let things go. And, I know they're going to good homes. So that's the best part of it, I would say.
Yeah. So do you consider yourself a collector?
Yeah. Look at my place.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. My wife is very happy that I have the office, especially not having her.
You don't want that in the living room?
No, definitely not. But yeah, I am a collector, and I've been very blessed in life. I've like visiting the fine art museums. When I saw this piece, I couldn't pass it up. And it's not because she's naked, but the artist's ability to capture things like the toes, the sheen along the legs, to me, these are things that not every artist has the ability to do. If you study a true artist, to see the ability to do the hands, legs, and feet, anyone can do beautiful breasts,
Yeah.
right? So.
I like it. What's if you don't mind talking about it, what kind of, or first, what's the most expensive piece you've ever purveyed? And then two, like, now that you've been doing it for a long time, can you talk about the margins in the industry?
Sure, without question. The most expensive knife that I've ever sold was a Michael Walker Shark's Tooth blade lock zipper. It sold to a collector in another country. So not only did he have to pay the upfront fee for it, but he had to pay the exchange rate, which was not in his favor. Plus he had to pay the VAT. So that piece exceeded $100,000. And that's before all of those things. And it exceeded $125,000 if we want to even go higher, which it did, right? The most in the custom knife world, there is no true wholesale and there's no true retail.
Right.
What I mean by that is when you look at jewelry, right, and clothing, you'll see that clothing is like 200 or 300% profit margin, right? And that's typically in the beginning when they get in the items. But there's so much profit on the front of those that they can have deep discounts on the end where they're giving the stuff away and they're still making money. In the knife world, getting back to when I was calling the knife makers, right, and asking them to say, listen, I'm Michael Donato. I'm creating a company of knife purveyor. Well, I guess I didn't know I was curious. I'm a knife purveyor at the time, right?
Right.
I said, do you offer any type of discounts? You have knife makers that don't offer any discount whatsoever. The price is the price. You had makers that were offering 10%, 15%, 20%. 20% is usually the highest that I ever negotiated with somebody. But that's on buying multiple pieces. Let's say I bought 3 knives from Scott Sawview at a 20% discount. If it was $1,000 knife, I got it for $800. So my goal would be to offer it for at least $1,000 his price, but add something on top, because you have to have margin. Without margin, you have, most people want to feel good about the items that they're purchasing, right? So I would say that industry standard on a consignment basis is 25%. 25% of whatever the item sells for. So let's say, for instance, this particular thing right here is, I really think it should be selling for $800. I would tell the person, the reserve price is $800, and I would ask $1,000. So that way there's negotiation room between what the list price is and the reserve price. Some people may say, no, Mike, I don't agree with you. It's yours. So, okay, well, tell me what you think it'll sell for, right? And you do your market analysis, because I've already done my market analysis. Most of my colleagues don't. They let the people price their own stuff. Me, I prefer to take their hand and make sure they're protected and that they're being advised accordingly. So there's usually anywhere from 25% is like a pretty much industry standard. If you've taken the time, like there's a knife maker, I waited 6 years to get the knife. 6 years. His price has gone up over those 6 years. His demand has gone up for those 6 years. Well, then I got the knife. Then I sent it out to be engraved. And that engraving cost more and more work and more time. Well, on a piece like that, a truly one-of-a-kind piece, the profit margin should be higher for sure. So, it could be 35, it could be 45, it could be 100% profit margin at that point. If you create a masterpiece that somebody else values and that they feel like, oh my God, that's like the cat's meow, I got to have it. Kind of like the knife with Ed Worms at that time. It was a $3,500 table price. He paid 10. No, Ron didn't make that profit margin, but the guy who bought it sure did.
Yeah.
So right there, was that almost 3 times? That's almost a 335, 7. If he would have sold for 10.5, he would have made 3 times his money. So that's a rarity. That's
Right.
not a common thing. But, when you look at like artwork, for instance, when you look at a Picasso, you look at a Dali, Dali's a probably poor example, but you look at a Chagall or you look at a Monet, look at how much canvas, how much paint, how much time went into that piece, and look how much money they're going for today. If you had the time to go back and commission Samuel Colt to make a revolver for you back in the day, would you have?
No,
Yeah, right. So here's a time today to work with artisans, true American artisans that are making handmade pieces that you can commission. And if you don't feel comfortable connecting them directly, someone like me can help expedite it and make it happen. So.
Gotcha. Well, it's I could sit and talk to you for hours. I know you're a busy man, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. Like, we've covered a lot of ground today. I feel like we've kind of got brought through your journey to get us here. Is there anything that we're missing or anything else that you'd like to tell us about?
Without question. Nothing has any value without any exposure, any introduction to it. That's a repetitive thing that we talked about today, right? So yes, I'm here in Wake Forest. Yes, we have a showroom, we have a gallery. Most people have no idea what we do. I would highly recommend if they visit knifepurveyor.com, look around. Don't buy anything. Please don't buy anything, because how do you know what you're buying, right? If something like this piques your interest, send me an email, give a call, say, hey, listen, I'd like to learn more. If you'd like to learn more, we've released on YouTube, we have a YouTube channel, Knife Purveyor. We were releasing a lot of videos that really specify about the knives, give information about the knives. If it's interesting to you, contact us. We're not looking to sell you. We'd rather convey the value, and then you can act on the value if you appreciate it. That's what I would say for sure. Sooner than later, we are going to be having an event here. We're going to invite X amount of people and really do something like an art symposium, but it's for the knife world, to introduce you to what we do. And if it's something you'd like to be a part of, contact us, and we'd invite people to come check it out, because what we do is super cool. It is highly addictive, completely unnecessary, costly, yet rewarding, all in one. So, for somebody that has everything, they don't have what I have.
Right.
So that's in its own right is cool. But you can be a kid in a candy store and make many, many wrong decisions because sugar kills so many people. Don't be a kid in a candy store. Come see me, the doctor, right? And me, right? As Axl Rose calls me, the knife pervert. So we help people enjoy what we do, because without you, we don't have anything. So if this is something that could appeal to you, that you would like to learn more about, hey, we're human. We're here for you. That's what I'd say.
Right. Yeah, you definitely called me and gave me a disclaimer before coming here.
Yeah.
But you made sure we did it here, not at my office, so I see what you're doing.
Exactly. 100%.
Two more questions that I like to ask.
Yeah.
One, if somebody's trying to get into this industry or do what you do, like what advice do you have for them?
My advice for this specific industry.
Yes, sir.
Speak to me before you do anything, I would say first and foremost, why do you want to be a part of this industry? What is your driving force? What is your goals? I would say that would be the first thing that I'd have to say, is because there's pie in the sky, right? And I'm a big fan of aiming for the stars and you can hit the moon, right? But it's also important to know your trajectory, right? So I would say before diving into something this niche, you need to know the market. You need to know what the potential is, the downfall of the market, the obstacles we have in the marketplace. Here's a quick thing to share with you. What we sell is the oldest tool known to man, developed on the highest level of craftsmanship, the rarest materials on Earth, from meteorite that's intergalactic to prehistoric mammoth to fossilized walrus to platinum to gold to diamonds, to having multiple artists create it, right? So we create pocket jewelry, works of art, right? So there's a very, very famous place called the SOFA Show, SOFA in Chicago. Sculpture and Objects of Functional Art. Okay, sounds like it'd be great for us to actually be a part of that, right? Well, there are so many pitfalls. And when I contacted SOFA to see if maybe I can be part of them, like, no, you're selling weapons. I'm like, whoa, wait. So there's a lot of obstacles. There are certain website companies that won't even allow you to use their platform to sell your knives on because you're selling a weapon. There are a lot of laws, there are a lot of rules, there are a lot of things internationally that you have to be knowing what you're doing you don't want to get in trouble or get anybody else in trouble. So I would say that if this is something you'd like to be a part of, I'd recommend you start making knives maybe. That would be the first step, you know what I mean? And if you want to really start to sell knives and you like knives, we're hiring. If you truly know your knives and you want to be able to work along somebody who really knows what they're doing most of the time, come here.
Right.
I'd say
Mentorship, super important.
Yeah.
And then the last main question I like to ask, because me figuring out my own definition had such an impact on my life, and has helped guide me to get me to a much better place in all aspects of my life. How do you define success?
Oof. I define success as 17 days in Japan, being able to be with my family. I defined it as making people happy, really. If they're just getting into the knife world, or if someone sadly passed, and helping the family out. The way that I started speech pathology was I was going to my Russian class in Sibley Hall in SUNY Plattsburgh, and there was a huge billboard with an oak tree with different leaves, and it said, all of the different ways that speech pathology and audiology help the community. And I'm looking at those oak leaves. And that's what appealed to me about speech pathology, helping people, giving back to the community, educating, communicating. So to me, just like now, talking to you, the phone may ring. And one time it was a famous movie star, and we were talking on the phone. And hearing his intonation and stress pattern go up while we were talking, knowing how pleased he was to speak with me about what brings him joy. You know, everyone's always grabbing at these people, right? Like these movie stars, these rock stars. Well, they come to me, which to me, I define that as a portion of the success. But the family, the time, flexibility, the freedom to be here during this conversation and not be pounding the phones or trying to say, okay, where's that next dollar coming from? That's what I think the use of time and happiness is success to me. Yeah, I'd say that I wish that for everybody. If you can make your bed in the morning and choose your own path of where you're going, boy, you're ahead of the game.
I don't think we can end it any better than that. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
That's awesome.
Okay, it looks like the clock is running. We're about to drop it right now. Face off, the Junior Canes are about to play against the Florida Surf. We got Will Cowan with the puck, tipped out by Donato. We got Mikel coming around the net with the puck on his stick, takes a little body check. We got Bennett Carter coming around the net. Donato goes to meet him. Puck is free behind the net. Donato passes it up to Conalata. Lana up to Carter. Carter comes across center ice, across the blue line, still has it on his stick. Nice keep in by Jack Douglas. And it's a goal! We got a power play goal, and it's all knotted up at 1-1.